Continue your accusations against me. Continue your blasphemies and your heresies. But I grant you this, under our Constitution, there is not another soul on this globe more free to hold their opinion and voice their opinion than they are as an American citizen.
I was quite intrigued with his accusation about your womanizing. I'm an expert on this subject, as you know. Tell us, you could enlighten us a little more about your relationship with your slaves.
Well, Dr. Franklin, I have never answered this subject in public, and if you will allow, I should not honor the occasion by doing so today. I consider it somewhat ungentlemanly that I should promote my opinion without the lady inferred to be present to offer her opinion upon it as well. And if there is to be any, foundation to the ventures de l'amour, then I rest upon what I have already written, Doctor, and you know it well, for we both drafted together and signed accordingly, that we are vested with inherent rights in nature, amongst which are life, liberty, and so.
The pursuit of happiness.
I rest my case entirely.
Well, I would ask Mr. Jefferson, is your pursuit of happiness something that would degenerate into a license? Is your pursuit of freedom of religion something that would degenerate into a public immorality? Is your freedom, sir, such that we cannot stand still without being concerned about what might become of us from this government that is all-powerful? Sir, is the freedom of the press to perjure the facts, to create a public sensation that our individual correspondences might be subjected to government inquiry, sir? Sir.
Did he ever ask a simple question?
These are not simple issues, Dr. Franklin. You might want to wish them away as simple issues and say, oh, well, we have this wonderful document. But, sir, the junction of the sword and the purse, as seen in this Constitution, creates a government that has the power to bolt the dungeons of despotism shut on you.
Well, all I can say is that paintings, like battles and differences in arguments, like paintings, should be seen at a distance. Proceed.
Is that the reason, Doctor, why on the eve of the French Revolution you will want to return to the United States and leave me there?
Oh, goodness, yes.
Citizens, once again, if you will, Colonel Henry attacks me upon what I consider the essential freedoms. The freedoms that are given to us, not only as Americans, but the freedoms that are given to the family of man across this globe, not by any government, not by any ruler. These are the liberties and freedoms that are given to the family of man by nature and nature's God. Mr. Henry thereby concerns himself with the freedoms that are provided us by nature and nature's God, concerns himself with the freedom for happiness, the pursuit thereof. Citizens, is that not as well our inalienable right? Not only to be happy, but to improve our condition, to own up to our capacity, to own up to our potential. Henry is want then thereby to consider the freedom for equality to be even questionable. Citizens, I ask you this: who better to speak on behalf of the equality of every individual to pursue their talents, to own up to their capacity, than Adam Smith, the author of The Wealth of Nations, who recognizes how it will benefit not only human society, but any nation upon the globe, when the individual is free to capitalize on their talents, free to capitalize on their potential, free to capitalize upon what coinage or monetary value they may hold within their own property. Oh, yes, thank you, Doctor. How well you know a penny saved is ever a penny earned, an essential rule and foundation
but
of
Mr.
Smith's
Jefferson,
Wealth of Nations.
What is your freedom for good health, let's say? I understand you will believe that riding a horse is good exercise. Is that not true, sir?
Yes, I'm
yes.
not...
Now, would your freedom under this government say that every citizen should be mandated to buy a horse because it will promote public health? That is what the power you are giving this government to do, sir. You can claim rights here and there, natural rights, But if the government is given unlimited power, such as this Constitution proposes to give, sir, everyone here will be mandated to buy a horse in order to comport with your notions of public health.
Let that be decided upon by the individual citizen. But if you are asking me about my opinion upon our nation's health, yes, as I have written, I think it is in a barbarous way. We have become far too reliant upon the poisonous liquors well beyond medicinal purpose. And therefore, I consider the future health of our nation to be pursued as the French have established it for themselves. The pursuit of viticulture. Citizens, no nation is drunken where wine is readily available. Nor is one sober where wine is dear. Let us come to understand wine is a necessity of life, a panacea for ailments, and conducive to good conversation. That is my opinion on the health of our nation.
There are some things that we can agree upon.
Beer is my favorite drink. You should serve some right now. But before we go on, perhaps there's people here in the audience who would like to ask a question of our two distinguished debaters. Yes, sir.
Gentlemen, implicit in your argument that our liberties are secured by this document is an assumption that our populace will never become lazy, apathetic, or stupid. What if they do?
Mr. Jefferson, I believe that question was directed at you.
I'm delighted to know it is directed to me by an enlightened citizenry gathered here. Obviously, these people are not those to whom you're referring, are they?
One vote, sir, not 51.
And yet, sir, your vote is as essential as your neighbor's. And that vote we look upon ascertaining later as in regard to who favors Mr. Henry's precepts, let alone my own. No, sir, what you have heard me speak is, I believe, the essential element of liberty for our future, and that is education. We cannot continue without a universal system of education. When you reflect that only those white males whose families have the means can send and afford to send only their eldest son to a classical academy, a Latin school, well, then you cannot help but realize our future will be in a great default unless we allow for a universal system of education. I have a greater faith in my fellow man, sir, and as well in our general citizenry here. Our revolution could not have emanated through an ignorant society. We must reflect that well before our revolution began, man was more free settled here in North America than he had probably been in his entire history. And perhaps the farther west he was settled, he tasted the sweetness of liberty. No one was looking over his shoulders in the guidance of his life. He knew how to hold the reins of self-government, having those essential liberties imposed upon by a government 3,000 miles removed. I can assure you, sir, the sweetness of liberty was wont to support a general enlightenment. We rose up in a frenzy of retaliation, grasping once more the reins of self-government, knowing where we had been, better equipped to guide ourselves forward. We were able to reclaim these liberties and to realize what is the essential principle upon which you speak. Whether one has the advantage of education or not, an honest heart is always the first requisite before a knowing head, and therefore to recognize freedom is not free. It requires an eternal vigilance.
Oh my goodness, it's the irascible John Adams.
Well, Henry, the day is yours.
I would like to debate John Adams, let alone Thomas Jefferson. Oh my God.
I have heard a great deal of sedition here, gentlemen. You, of course, my good friend Thomas Jefferson, my vice president, by the way, under the Alien and Sedition Acts.
For only 4 years, John.
I charge you, Jefferson, the calumny, the treasonous words out of this mouth of this giant Virginian. I charge you, the other giant Virginian, the intellectual giant, to arrest him this moment for the seditious remarks he has made. Will you?
No, I stand behind our Bill of Rights, sir. He has all reason to remain silent and to be attended to by justice impartially delivered.
Yes, and it appears, though, that Mr. Adams, you have distorted beyond recognition freedom and liberty. Is it not that anybody that speaks against you can be arrested? Is that not a law that you promoted?
Why,
I
of
believe
course.
it is, yes.
Ever since I defended the British soldiers in the so-called Boston Massacre, I have always modeled our system upon the British. We should have royalty. My son John should be president soon.
And Mr. Jefferson, I believe you spoke quite harshly against Mr. Adams' position on some of these positions, did you not?
Indeed, I certainly did. I believe that the Alien and Sedition Acts were an imposition upon our liberties. As you well know, John, were it left to me to decide whether we should have this nation with a government and no newspapers, or have this nation with newspapers and no government, I would not hesitate a moment but to accept the latter. After all, who must know? The people. Who must ultimately make up their minds of what they hear or read in the newspapers? The people. And therefore, to attempt to quell the opinion of the people by denying them the obvious elements of the facts, whether they be twistified or not, that the people will ultimately discern for themselves, is to deny them the inherent right of information, the inherent right of fact, the inherent right of